Wonderful. The clock has now struck 6, and so we are going to get started with our information session on an epic week with Homer, which will take place this summer in the heat of August, although there is no better place than the University of Chicago at that time of year. It is gorgeous and typically not as hot as many other places in the world. And let me just share that we are going to have a three-part presentation over the next 30 or so minutes, and then we're going to spend the latter half of this information session answering your questions. So I'm Seth Green, the Dean of the Graham School, and I'm going to talk about the origins of this program, give you a little snapshot of what it looks like. But the more important snapshot is going to come from David Ray, the faculty member who will be teaching and will be your intellectual guide to Homer and the many other adaptations. And then I will turn it over to my colleague, Tim Murphy, who leads the Master of Liberal Arts and who is charged with oversight of this. And he will talk through the logistics, and then we'll be ready to answer your questions. So let me start by sharing a little bit for those who are not familiar about the Graham School. We have a wonderful array of programming across the liberal arts. And what many of you may be familiar with is our open enrollment and basic program where you can kind of come, take classes and everything from great books all the way over to a full catalog across disciplines of the university. We also have travel study, and then we have a graduate degree called the Master of Liberal Arts, where individuals really rigorously go across the disciplines of the university to go through an advanced liberal arts study. And the reason I show this is because this Epic Week with Homer is actually a UChicago seminar for lifelong learners that will combine multiple of our competencies. We've put it into an open enrollment format, but it actually brings the type of rigor and the faculty that teach in our Master of Liberal Arts. And so you'll hear from David Ray, the instructor, who also teaches in the college, in the humanities division, and in the Master of Liberal Arts. So why did we come to this particular topic and this approach of a residential seminar? We started with a question, and this was something that Tim and I were talking about after we actually had this wonderful meeting with a group of our alums. And the question was, how can we engage our students in this distinctive intellectual community in Hyde Park? And the origin of that question is that we now have learners all across the world, and most of our classes are in Zoom. And historically, we've been a school that has sent our students on travel study to Oxford and to Greece and to other places, and we still do that. So those who are interested, you can certainly still look forward to a UChicago experience in those places. But we realize that with our students around the world now, and most outside of the Chicago area, that Hyde Park was also a destination, and that this very special intellectual community and being embedded in it for a meaningful period of time would be a very special way for another type of travel study, in this case, for people who want to really experience the full rigor and delight through a week-long immersion in one of the world's great universities, a place where we like to say big ideas are born. I'll share that while this is the first UChicago seminar for lifelong learners of its exact type, we have had prior what we call residential seminars for the MLA. We had them on humanistic inquiry, on ethical thought, on digital ethics, and on 1970s American literature and inequality. And I'll just share that those have received outstanding reviews, and our students have described having really deep experiences, building meaningful relationships, and having a real joy on our Hyde Park campus, feeling a part of it after sometimes many years away for alumni, or for others, their first experience in an in-depth way in the core of the university. And I'll just read here one of the reviews that Tim shared with me after a seminar. This experience changed me. I am expanded. I am more knowledgeable. I am more open. I've been exposed to more possibilities, and I believe in more possibilities. So what is happening in this particular week is that you are going to be navigating the depths of Homer's narratives while engaging in what is a classic tradition at the Graham School, Socratic dialogue. You will explore the seminal text, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and a collection of hymns to God and goddesses, but you'll also look at how Homer has actually come into so many different adaptations in painting and cinema and in other arts. And you'll not just do that in looking in textbooks, but you'll actually be visiting the Regenstein Library. You'll also be visiting ISAC, the Institute of the Advanced Study of Ancient Cultures. And what you'll be able to do in those places is actually see one of the most renowned Homer collections in the world, which we are joyful to have at the University of Chicago. And all this will be with meals and tours and community building experiences so that you build a real relationship with your peers. And this is still being fully finalized, but this just gives you a sense of the structure where you'll have class in the morning and in the afternoon. You'll also have some meaningful visits. We'll have guest lecturers coming in. We'll have welcome dinners, tours, and altogether it will be a week of discovery grounded in the seminar that David will teach, but with a real opportunity to experience the many forms of art and humanities that exist all across Hyde Park and especially on our campus. But let me not be the one to tell you all about this seminar. Let's turn it over to David Ray, who is Associate Professor here at the University of Chicago in the Department of Classics, the Department of Comparative Literature, and the college. He is the author of Catalyst and the Poetics of Roman Manhood, which was published by Cambridge, a co-editor of Seneca and the Self, and he is currently writing Ovid at the Tragic Core of Modernity. He is also, I have to say, in addition to being a world-class scholar, one of the most beloved instructors that I have ever interacted with. His students, and I have met many of them because they come up to me and tell me as dean how lucky they feel to have been in his class, just talk about what a gifted educator he is, which for us is very much an equal status to being a great scholar and one that we really value in terms of being able to bring the joy of lifelong learning into the classroom. And with that, David, let me turn it over to you to talk about the course.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you very much. So let's see if you'll, that's it. Good. So now I will now share my screen. I have a set of PowerPoint slides as well. Let's see. And so thank you for that very kind introduction. And Tim had mentioned that I might say a word or two about my work, which is not normally something I do, but I thank you very much for those kind words. But I just thought I would talk a little bit, just very briefly, about my interests. So I'm a classicist by training and trade. I work mostly in Greek and Roman poetry and poetics. Literary translation, both the theory of that and the practice of that, is something that I've always been interested in. I'm working on a set of translations of some neoclassical French drama based on Greek mythology. I'm very interested in what we now tend to call classical reception, so all kinds of adaptations and transformations of Roman culture in all kinds of artifacts. In addition to 17th century French poetry, I'm very interested in English poetry written in the 20th century, and then ancient Greco-Roman gender and sexuality. That was the focus of my first book on Catullus and the Poetics of Roman Manhood. Let's see if this thing works. It does. I co-edited with my colleague Shadi Barch this volume on Seneca, the Roman philosopher who lived in the first century of our era. So philosophy and literature is another main interest of mine. And I thought I might go ahead and, since I'm shamelessly plugging things, I might mention that my upcoming course next year in the winter in the Master of Liberal Arts program is called Aristotle and Confucius on Leadership, a thing that is occupying me a lot these days in my comparative literature side is the study of classical Chinese. You know, I thought Greek and Latin and Sanskrit were hard, but now I'm studying classical Chinese, and it is way more difficult, and I have really utterly fallen in love with it. So I'm hoping to do something on Greco-Roman and classical Chinese comparative poetry and poetics at some point. That won't happen next year, but I will teach this course, and I'm really excited about that. Just wanted to let you know that that's there. But another major interest of mine is Homer. And Alice, I am so delighted to see that you are here with us. So this volume, Homer in Print, is a catalog and celebration of the remarkable gift to our library by Michael Lang of this beautiful and unique collection of Homer books and artifacts, including so many of the best available editions, first editions, really remarkable things, and it's quite a treasure. And it was such a wonderful thing to collaborate with Alice and Glenn Most on producing this volume and all the celebration that went into it. And I contributed an essay that talks about some of the early modern translations of Homer. The first complete translation of Homer was done by a French woman named who did prose translations of Homer with remarkable commentaries. And the first major translation of Homer into English, or I guess I should say the major poetic translation of Homer into English, was done by Alexander Pope, the remarkable neoclassical poet who actually leaned very, very heavily on Andassier's French edition. His Greek was okay, but it was not awesome. But what an amazing, amazing poet he is. So we'll actually commune some with Alexander Pope's translation. Some words about Homer. Homer, who or what is Homer, and who or what person or collection of persons or cultural system brought into being the texts that we call the epics of Homer. This so-called Homeric question is something that really we don't have direct access to. We know that there was a long, centuries-long oral tradition of poets devoting their lives to the craft of oral performances that were composed, that were both traditional and also included improvisation in every recreation, kind of like jazz music. But we also obviously have written poems, and we don't exactly know how that happened. That is to say, we don't know exactly at what point they were written down, nor do we know how much the poems changed during after the time that they were first written down to the time that we have them now. Homeric scholarship had already begun in antiquity, debating about the meaning of lines of the poems had already begun as well, and the cult of Homer. So this is a 19th century French painting called the Apotheosis of Homer, and down at the bottom you can see some notable early modern French figures. I think that's Molière maybe down there on the right, and some others. And so he's being crowned in front of this neoclassical temple. A lot can be said about that, and we'll say a lot of things about the whole set of cultural transmissions by which we possess these poems that we call Homer. There are a number of other traditions where we have epic poems and there's an author's name attached to it, but we don't exactly know what is the referent, like who or what that name refers to. That's the case with the Sanskrit epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. It's the case with the Persian epic, the Shahnameh, and a number of great epics around the world. So here are some things that this course, this Epic Week with Homer, will include. I've said a thing already about origins and transmissions. We'll also study a little bit historical and cultural contexts. You know, I imagine that the historical theme of the Homeric poems is the events of the so-called Trojan War. You might know that until an eccentric banker living, an eccentric German banker living in San Francisco named Schliemann did the bold move of going to where he thought Troy was and doing an archaeological excavation and finding what is taken to be the material remains of Troy. Until that point, most scholars thought that Troy and the Trojan War was most likely a kind of historical fiction or a kind of myth. And so, okay, so now we have this historical city that existed. What's the relationship between that city and the events that are narrated in Homer's poems? That's a fascinating question, again, to which we can't ever really know the exact answer. And we certainly know that the Homeric poems are the product of long centuries in between. And the poems actually include elements that are very archaic, as well as elements that are more recent. Some of the elements of Homer's poems have cognates that reach far back into antiquity, long before any of the Indo-European languages were written down. And then other aspects of the poem include elements of Greek dialects and Greek cultural forms that would have belonged to the time of composition. But the main thing that we will be doing, it will mainly be an intensive, well, I should say intensive, but also relaxed. Reading and discussing in humanities seminar style of Homer's poetry, including key passages from the Homeric hymns, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. And we will also, as Seth mentioned, examine and discuss some of the transformations and adaptations of Homeric epic in visual art, especially painting and cinema. I already showed you that one painting, and I think we'll probably watch one movie during the week. So let me delve into each of these bullet points just a little bit. Seth mentioned the trip that we'll make to special collections to commune with the Biblioteca Homerica Langiana, which I talked about just a little bit. This illustration here is the first page of the first book of the Iliad in Alexander Pope's translation. It might be too small for you to be able to read, but interestingly, if you were to go and look at the Penguin edition of Alexander Pope's translation, you wouldn't see quite this version because Pope had changed the opening and in my mind improved it a lot by the second edition. By the way, this translation of the Iliad made Pope a rich man. Because he was Catholic, he was not allowed to study at either Oxford or Cambridge, and when he produced his translation of Homer, he didn't produce it until he had achieved enough subscriptions to make him a rich man. So here's a place where the translation of Homer sort of participates in this early modern, wave of prosperity, and also very important in the relationship between epic poetry and a sense of cultural prestige. That's what made, among other things, made Milton, want to produce an epic in the English language to ennoble the English language and its culture by showing that this language is an instrument of epic poetry that can attain the level of Homeric grandeur. We will also, as Seth mentioned, make a trip to ISAC, the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures. There's so much generosity in this intellectual community, and so when I reached out to ISAC, Tasha, who is one of the people who works especially with continuing education students, wrote back to me and said, well, how about if I do an hour tour with the students, and then we have this astonishing, well, here's some of the amazing antiquities that we'll see, mostly from Egypt and the Near East, but there are some artifacts that are directly related to Troy. But she will also spend probably about a half an hour talking with us about this treasure. This is a papyrus that is a text of Homer. It's a page from the second book of the Iliad, from the catalog of ships, and it comes from the 1st or 2nd century of our era. So around the time maybe that Nero was emperor, this would have been papyrus in Egypt, and we'll have the opportunity to look at this text, look at this artifact, and Tasha will tell us all about what we know of it. So again, reading and discussion of Homer's poetry, the Iliad and the Odyssey, as I said about the Trojan War, they are very, very strange ways that they tell. You might expect that the Iliad is going to be rah rah, we Greeks are wonderful, we're going to conquer those Trojans, but really just the opposite. It tells the story of a dreadful, terrible quarrel that erupts between the king Agamemnon and the warrior Achilles that almost loses the war for the Greeks and causes terrible bloodshed and near defeat for the Greeks. And the poem ends with an astonishing act of mercy and compassion on the part of the warrior Achilles. Achilles has killed Hector in revenge because Hector has killed Achilles' beloved friend Patroclus, and then Hector's father comes with a ransom to beg for the body of Hector for burial, and Priam reminds Achilles that he too has a father and that he too is mortal, and these two men who are bitter enemies weep together, and Achilles agrees to give the body of Hector to his father Priam for burial, and the poem ends with dirges of lament for Hector and the burial of Hector. So it ends by heroizing and memorializing the death not of a Greek fighter, but of a Trojan prince who died defending his city. And then the Odyssey, that tells us what happens in the 10 years after the Trojan War, the wanderings of Odysseus to make his way home. An equally strange story because the epic opens and we meet him on an island where he is kind of imprisoned, sort of, kind of. He's kind of the boy toy of a nymph who has imprisoned him from Olympus to tell Calypso, the gods have decided it's time for you to let Odysseus go. And she's, well, right then, Odysseus, you can build a raft, I suppose, which he then does. He finds his way to another island. He tells his story, and that's sort of the middle of the poem. And those Phaeacians in this island say, right, we'll take you home. He gets on this magic boat, he falls asleep, and he wakes up and finds himself at home in Ithaca. That's only halfway through the poem, because after that he goes into disguise and sort of spies on what's going on in his household. His wife, Penelope, who has now been waiting for him for just about 20 years, home that is beset with suitors because they are pressuring her. The whole culture is pressuring this woman into remarrying precisely because she seems to be the daughter of the sort of mega king of this island complex, and the man who marries her, it seems, will become the king of this island. And so Odysseus is watching all of this happen, and at a climactic moment at the end, he reveals himself, and in fact, the poem ends with him slaughtering all of the suitors, but it also ends with a really remarkable homecoming and reunion scene between Penelope and Odysseus. Odysseus, the trickster who never stops being a trickster, even at the end of the epic. We will also read from the Homeric hymns in this I don't think I mentioned these beautiful new translations by Emily Wilson are in blank verse, that is to say, 5-beat iambic lines, which is the meter of Alexander Pope's lines. Though Pope's lines rhyme, it's the meter of Milton. It's the meter of most of Shakespeare, and they're really astonishingly beautiful, fluent, but also at the same time contemporary, clear, lucid, engaging translations. I don't know, you may have read earlier translations of the Iliad. Some of them are really, really rough going, and this translation is not rough going. I remember many years ago, soon after I had arrived here, I saw a poster because we usually make students read the Iliad in their first year humanities core, and it was someone who was running for, I think, student government president or something like that, and she had a picture. She had her picture and her name. I think the name was. I want to say Sarah Chernevsky, and it showed the picture and it said, Sarah Chernevsky, like reading the Iliad, only fun. And she was saying, I have the substance, the deservingness of the prestige of the Iliad, but I'm not dreadfully boring and painful to read the way that the the way that the Iliad is, and indeed it is in some older translations. And so I just mention that because the Iliad sometimes gets a bad rap, and Emily Wilson has really come to the rescue of the Iliad in so many ways. It's such gorgeous poetry, by the way, the way Homer's poetry. There's really nothing like it in the world. Homer was my special author when I was a graduate student for my oral examinations, and I've been dreadfully in love with Homer ever since then. But the Homeric hymns, translated by Sarah Rudin, are probably later than the Iliad and Odyssey, and this is a collection of hymns of various lengths to gods and goddesses, major gods and goddesses like Demeter, Aphrodite, and Hermes, and we'll read some of those. The hymn to Demeter is astonishing. It tells the story of Demeter's daughter being abducted by the king of the underworld, and you might remember the story that's the story of why it is that we have seasons, because when Persephone is in the underworld, her mother Demeter, who is the earth, turns the world to winter. I thought I would read this very brief and beautiful hymn from this collection translated by Sarah Rudin. Let me see if I can read it on the screen. But I just wanted to give you a taste of Homeric epic. I'll sing of Earth, life's mother, the rock-founded oldest god and the feeder of creation. Whatever walks bright land, whatever paddles the sea or flies, your wealth alone provides for. You give lush fields and lovely children, lady. You give and take the livelihood of humans. Whoever your heart honors with its kindness is happy. All things lavishly are his. Crops weigh his fields down, cattle crowd his meadows, and fine possessions overflow his mansion. Earth's favorites rule by good laws over cities of lovely women. Splendid wealth attends them. Their sons thrive in exuberance and pleasure. Their joyful virgin daughters leap and scamper in flower-draped troops on softly blooming meadows. This is your favor, holy, generous goddess. Joy, mother of gods and starry heaven's consort. Give me a heartening living for my song's sake. I'll sing us another song when yours is over. Flourish at the end, you can hear the performance context of the voice. That's the poet at the end saying, remember, friends, I'm a poet for a living. I wander from city to city and I sing these tales, and I'm supported by your generosity. When he says that, give me a heartening living. And then it's also, he's sort of queuing up the next hymn that he's going to sing. So in the hymns, we get a sense sort of this performance context and what it might have been like to be in the presence of them. So for the transformations and adaptations, in addition to the ancient and modern visual artifacts that we'll look at, I'm thinking that we'll probably watch this old sword and sandal war horse that I would say has aged rather well. It's from 1954 with Silvana Mangano, who plays both the nymph Calypso and then also plays Penelope, interestingly, and and then a young Kirk Douglas in the role of Odysseus. And that's what I have to say about this course and what I have so far planned. It's still under construction. The more I work on planning it, the more excited I get about it.
Well, thank you so much, David. That was fascinating, and it is a testament to the excitement that you bring to these studies. And for those who are interested in potentially being part of this, I want to now turn it over to my colleague, Tim Murphy, who can talk about the logistics.
I guess it's my honor to follow up David's passionate recital of Homer with some nuts and bolts logistics, but I'm happy to do it all the same. I just have two quick slides to cover a couple of the accommodations and enrollment matters. So as Seth mentioned, the week-long course is being held on our beautiful Hyde Park campus this August, and lodging accommodations are being left to the discretion of students. So Chicagoland area students are, of course, welcome to commute daily to and from campus. But for those of you who may be traveling from further away to join us this August, based on feedback that we've received from students who have participated in prior iterations of this residency format, we recommend staying at the Study, which is a hotel just on the south end of our campus. We recommend that both because it's a beautiful new building, but also because it's located, it's a 5-minute walk from the main quad where David's class will be held. Another option is the Sophie. It's the second nearest hotel to campus in Hyde Park. It's located on 53rd Street, and it's probably about a 15-minute walk to campus. And in fact, I will drop the links to both of those hotels in the chat there, but I'll send it to everybody. That won't want just the Seth. So there it goes to everybody. Tuition for what I should say that there's two ways to participate in the Homer class this August. If you're a current MLA student and you want to take this class for your MLA degree, we'll handle enrollments like we do for all of your other MLA courses, and it'll be the normal MLA tuition rate. We can count it toward the humanities requirement for the MLA degree. We can count it as a general elective or as satisfying the literary studies concentration. But if you're not an MLA student and you want to take this class as a non-credit experience, like one of the other Graham Open Enrollment classes, you can register at a link that I, again, will put in the chat here. And it's also on the website that I'm sure all of you found by virtue of making it into the room here tonight. So tuition for the non-credit option is $24.95. Scholarships are available for those who may need partial financial assistance. If you're in that category, please reach out to me directly, and my email is also now in the chat, because we'll register you through a separate link from the main one. So if you're looking for a scholarship, please reach out to me at my email in the chat there. It's important to note that in order to have the best possible experience in the Socratic seminar tradition, we're capping enrollments at 18. And we've already heard from a number of MLA students who are committed to attending. So if you're interested, you are encouraged to register soon. We'll be doing rolling admissions, and we'll keep enrollments open until we reach the cap at 18. I think that's all I have by way of logistics for here, but I'm sure I'll turn it back over to Seth for a Q&A from the audience now, right?
Right, yes, I took down the screen for a reason. We want to get out of presentation mode and use the remaining time to answer your questions. And so we welcome them in one